Did you notice that this show doesn't have any commercials? I'm not selling you diapers or vitamins or smoothies or gasoline. That's because I don't want corporate sponsors telling us what to investigate and what to say. Instead, you're our sponsors. This is a production by our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. If you want more investigations, more hard-hitting news, if you want the truth, go to ICanDecide.org and donate now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are out there in this beautiful world. How about we step out onto the high wire? Thank you for joining me today. Now, if you've come out and seen me speak publicly, whether it's at one of these health conventions or on stages around the world, you've probably seen my PowerPoints. And in my PowerPoint, I tend to use this quote from Aldous Huxley, usually to start out my show. Medical science has made such tremendous progress that there is hardly a healthy human left. Of course, that's Aldous Huxley. For those of you who don't know who Aldous Huxley is, he wrote the famous dystopian novel Brave New World, in which it's a futuristic story about a society referenced as, I believe it's called the world state, where essentially from the time children are born, their emotions and their sexuality is taken away, their independence. It's a world where essentially everybody owns everybody. Everybody's in control of everybody. There are no individuals left. And I think if you're like me in these times, you really are starting to question what is really going on here.
I have no idea why you guys are doing this. Yeah, you can show me your search warrant before you go through my house.
You're under arrest in relation to incitement.
Incitement?
What's this?
I had an ultrasound in an hour because
Yeah,
I'm
she's pregnant, so...
Well, take it easy.
What's this about?
But I have an ultrasound
Just let me
in an
finish.
hour.
Let me finish and I'll explain. It's in relation to a Facebook post, in relation to a lockdown protest you put on for Saturday.
Yeah, and I wasn't breaking any laws by doing that.
You are actually. You are breaking the law. That's why I'm arresting you.
This feels like some sort of futuristic novel. The control, the tracking, the loss of identity, the loss of freedom, the loss of speech. So many friends of mine have said this feels like 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit 451 all rolled into one. Well, as I got to thinking about this, I referenced an old interview, one that I watch, every once in a while when I just want to sort of say, is there time travel? Is there some way these guys saw into the future? Did they see into the future? Were they prophetic? Or are we just living into the future they described? This is a question that goes on in my mind. But if you have never seen the interview that Aldous Huxley did back in 1959, I would recommend that you check it out. Here is just a piece. When you think about what do they know? Did they look into the future or did we live into it? One thing is for sure. It definitely seems that Aldous Huxley had a grasp on the moment we're in right now. Take a look at this.
If you want to preserve your power indefinitely, you have to get the consent of the ruled. And this they will do, partly by drugs, as I foresaw in Brave New World, partly by these new techniques of propaganda. They will do it by bypassing the sort of rational side of man and appealing to his subconscious and his deeper emotions and his physiology even, and so making him actually love his slavery. I mean, I think this is the danger, that actually people may be in some ways happy under the new regime, but they will be happy in a situation where they oughtn't to be happy.
Can you imagine, do you know somebody that loves their slavery right now, that loves wearing a mask where you can't see them smile, that loves being stuck in their basement playing their video games or watching Nintendo, loves not going to work? Perhaps they're already on psychotropic drugs. Maybe they are being made to feel good about this. But Aldous Huxley in Brave New World talks about a drug soma, this idea that we'll all be taking a drug to make us deal, as he said, to accept the conditions of a world that we ought not to accept. The reason this all came up in my mind is there are some really, upstanding, educated individuals that are starting to celebrate the idea of this in the future, or maybe just right around the corner. This is why I've always been against any sort of mandated medical products, because once you start with a vaccine, what stops them from saying, we're going to go ahead and force your child to have Ritalin in school, or force your daughter who's having some issues dealing with her emotions, we're going to force her to be on psychotropic drugs, antidepressants, Prozac, things like that. This is a slippery slope we should not step on. And if you think that Aldous Huxley is overstating it, look at what an upstanding professor in the United States of America wrote. Check out this article. The conversation this comes from. How about morality pills? Maybe the U.S. is best shot at ending the coronavirus pandemic, according to one ethicist. COVID-19 is a collective risk. It threatens everyone, and we all must cooperate. Remember when Aldous Huxley was talking about emotions? That a threat, a fear, an emotion we all share together in a world where we're all in control of each other. This is what he was talking about. It threatens everyone, and we all must cooperate to lower the chance that the coronavirus harms any one individual. Among other things, that means keeping safe, social distances, and wearing masks. But many people choose not to do these things, making spread of infection more likely. Goes on to talk about how we might turn down vaccines and everything else. But I believe society may be better off, both in the short term as well as the long, by boosting not the body's ability to fight off disease, but the brain's ability to cooperate with others. What if researchers developed and delivered a moral enhancer rather than an immunity enhancer? Moral enhancement is the use of substances to make you more moral. The psychoactive substances act on your ability to reason about what the right thing to do is, or your ability to be empathetic or altruistic. Then perhaps the people who choose to go maskless or flout social distancing guidelines would better understand that everyone, including them, is better off when they contribute and rationalize that the best thing to do is cooperate. It's happening, right? We're in this world. Teachers, this gentleman is teaching students. Parker Crutchfield is a professor. His ideas are being taught to children that are in universities. How many people think like this? How many people are talking about population control, good of the whole, destruction of the individual? Individuals who stand out or flout an original space of thinking should be drugged. Maybe we all get drugged. There's even been discussions about drugging the water, or perhaps vaccinations delivered by mosquitoes. All of this is in the discussions by science right now. And today, I'm going to focus today's show on this idea of world dominance, world power, control of people. We're going to be discussing we're talking to some whistleblowers. We're going to discuss, what did Edward Snowden or Julian Assange or Chelsea Manning have to do with this discussion? Were we warned? Today I want to talk about all of those things, but before we get there, let's go ahead and find out what did happen in the world today with the Jackson Report. Jeffrey Jackson, okay, what's going on in this crazy world?
Great intro, Del. Very important stuff. Now, let's just go right into health professionals, health officials. There's a mass exodus of health officials vacating their positions. And it went from a slow drip to kind of a really strong current at this point. This is U.S. health officials resign. This is Fox 5 Atlanta. They're quitting or getting fired amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, in the article, it's really fascinating. It says a review by the Kaiser Health News Service and the Associated Press finds at least 49 state and local public health leaders have resigned, retired, or been fired since April across 23 states. The list has grown by more than 20 people since the AP and Kaiser Health News started keeping track in June. Fascinating news. This is a big deal. I mean, this is like the Titanic's going down and you're seeing people jump off as people are saying everything's fine. We've covered the counting scandals, however you want to label those, the counting mishaps, the blunders, so many times on this show. And these people leaving, for whatever reason they're leaving, It doesn't just stop at the state and local level. It goes to the federal level too. We have Health and Human Services. The CIO has stepped down. This is the Chief Information Officer. He was the agency's third CIO in 2 years and spent just 16 months at HHS. His departure was preceded by former Chief Product Officer Todd Simpson, who left in July. So the CIO, it was described as an abrupt leaving. He claimed he was leaving to help his kids with Zoom, spend more time with his kids and help them with Zoom because his 5 and 8-year-old, were having problems with school and he needed to help them with that.
Well, it really makes me think, when you look at this, and obviously this is conjecture. We don't know why. We don't know these people. We keep trying to reach out and see if some of these people will talk about what's really going on. But under, the guise of what I just talked about, if there was this shift that was happening inside of health departments towards, feeding misinformation, leading people into their own slavery with, and trying to make them feel okay about it. So many doctors coming up to me now saying, there's just no deaths in our hospital. There never has been. We never had a wave, yet I see the news reporting about the wave inside of our hospitals. How many people like that can stay in that job and continue to watch the lies coming out? And these aren't just doctors, right? These are officers. These are people that are going to be in charge, right, of writing the language, of going out to the public, of trying to convince us that every single person that's dying of COVID-19 that they actually died of COVID-19, when some of it is assumptions and they weren't even tested. Or maybe they had, they died with COVID-19, but they were really at a heart attack 2 days earlier, or heart disease, or all of the different issues. All of these things that are compromising. And as you know, on our team, we've been talking a lot about how are they getting away with this in the world, right? How have so many different countries and health departments signed on? Well, because we don't really pay attention when officials sign off, do we? We just don't look at it. But when you see this, it's kind of scary. Why are all these people signing off? I'm sure they've signed non-disclosure agreements just to have the jobs, so we're never going to know why they're leaving. But is it possible that their ethics and their morals are not allowing them to accept their slavery or the slavery they're inflicting? Really a fascinating story, and I think it's something that we're going to have to keep our eye on. And I'd be curious what's happening around the rest of the world too.
Yeah, it's like you said, this isn't a definitive statement of why they're leaving. We're looking across headlines, we're looking at facts, and there is a lot of people leaving. It doesn't even stop there. We have another HHS Inspector General has stepped down. This was after 15 years.
Wow.
Daniel Livingston didn't give a reason, and then at the CDC has not been spared by it either. The CDC's Chief of Staff and Deputy Chief of Staff both left. They only spent 2 years at the agency, and they both left to start a consulting firm. So everyone can make their own conclusions about this, but looking at it in the totality, it definitely paints a certain picture that I think is really important to look at. And like you said, internationally as well, we reported on the Public Health England was closing its doors. That's a gigantic deal too. So going over to universities, college has started, and the kids in these colleges, again, looking at some of the reporting across the world, but in America specifically, the kids in these colleges are being treated, in my opinion, like a petri dish, because all of the stuff we've heard during this coronavirus response of suggestions of, hey, maybe we can let people download something on their app, we can track them like that, or Mayor Eric Garcetti in Los Angeles, hey, citizens, snitch on your neighbors, we'll turn their water off. All of this stuff is now being tried in the college university kind of microcosm of what they're looking at. So the students now are being asked to snitch on their fellow students if they see them breaking rules or acting in an unsafe manner when it comes to COVID-19. So this has gotten such mainstream press that there was an opinion article written in the New York Times by 2 professors at Cornell. And they say, don't make kids the coronavirus police. And they say inside the reasoning, people report on one another truthfully or falsely for a number of personal reasons, including competition, revenge, leverage, and everyday aggravations. There's every reason to assume that these motivations will bubble up in the college context too. Now, I went to a couple of these, call them snitch portals. We have Texas A&M. the students can log directly on to the reporting portal, and it says right there, if you're reporting on an individual, please remember to keep all information strictly confidential. But as you go into the form, if you visit that, you know, it asks for their name, it asks for their address, it asks for all their information. So this is a fascinating time for college students, and you know, it just piles more stress on for them. And then I grabbed another screenshot of Yale. This is Yale's reporting, and it says compliance. You know, you click that box, it's compliance on COVID-19 health and safety standards. And perhaps, you know, to top this story off, Science Mag wrote a piece. And what some of the colleges are doing is they're asking kids to sign a document, basically to waive their rights. So grad students challenge university-mandated COVID-19 agreements, and they are challenging this, which is a positive thing in my opinion. And it says in the article, the document they're expected to sign lays out expectations for how students will behave on campus given fears of COVID-19 transmission, as well as punishment procedures for those who don't follow the rules. So you're signing your rights away to get punished. Whether the college, you know, takes this thing seriously or not, it's setting these kids up to be scapegoats legally if something does happen on the campus, whether it's their fault or not.
It's absolutely incredible when you think about the culture of universities. We've had such a rise in depression, studies about depression, a rise in suicides in universities. It just feels like this is just going to exacerbate that loneliness even more, people turning each other in. And then the culture of peer pressure that goes on, just another reason to pressure your peers. What if they have an autoimmune disease? What if they have some sort of neurological disorder? What if they're on the spectrum and they just, you know, can't handle, you know, the mask or something like that? You know, these children are going to be bullied and reported, and we're justifying you know, prejudice, really, it seems to me. We're creating a prejudice against people. We're making judgments about people we know nothing about, simply walking by us. It's terrifying. And again, when I think about, you know, the topics we're covering this today and how I started, this is how the future looked in many of these novels, where we're all turning each other in. We're all working for Big Brother, essentially. We know what the rules are. You're breaking it. And if you're outside of that, if we catch you kissing inappropriately, if you're too close together, right? Social distancing. I mean, it literally said it on all those college websites. That means I saw two people kissing. Are you kidding me? Are we really telling people to report that there's affection going on, a hug, a kiss? Really, really terrifying. And I'll be honest, if my children were college age right now, I'd be seriously thinking twice about sending them into these institutions. I think that there's, you know, let's teach our kids to learn how to critically think, how to read, how to advance their own education themselves, because this system is disgusting, terrifying, and it's how they're going to get away with it, right? The brainwashing of the next generations, you know, to, you know, get rid of their sense of independence, their individuality. It is now we all control each other. Really unbelievable report. Thank you, Jeffrey.
You're welcome. Now let's talk fact checkers. Now, as we know here at the Highwire, fact checkers are only for conspiracy theorists and flat earthers. But apparently now the BMJ has been roped into just labeling things false information. It's been fact checked by Facebook. This is again the BMJ. This was an
Medical
editorial.
Journal. Now, just very quickly for people who don't know what BMJ means, British Medical Journal, I think, sits in the top 5 peer-reviewed medical journals in the world, along with New England Journal of Medicine, The Lancet, and others.
Yeah, and this was an article. The article that was fact-checked, this was an article published on February 28th, and it's titled Preventing a COVID Pandemic. It's written by John Watkins, a consultant epidemiologist at Public Health Wales. Just to give people the context here, this was about 2 weeks before Neil Ferguson of Oxford University gave his computer code that said millions will die of this thing if we don't lock down the society.
Right.
So point saying that is there was a gigantic conversation going on of how to figure out what we're dealing with here, what worked before, what didn't. And this editorial was published, and a comment was made there by a pediatrician, and the pediatrician's comment said essentially, it was saying if we are talking about this thing, we have to look at perhaps the flu shot. Since we're looking at data points, he says John Watkins overlooks the possibility that seasonal flu shots are potential contributors to the current outbreak. A randomized placebo-controlled trial in children showed that flu shots increase 5-fold the risk of acute respiratory infections caused by a group of non-influenza viruses, including coronaviruses. So, you know, I thought science was supposed to be discussing, especially as this outbreak is just starting, science is supposed to be discussing best practices. Let's throw all the science in the pot. Let's throw what we know in the pot. Let's shake it up and come out with a reason to do this. And now that's a fact-checked issue. That's something that is misinformation. Yet, again, Neil Ferguson gets a free pass with his computer code that no one can see.
Paying off by like millions, literally millions of code that he didn't want to show anybody. And you know what? For people to understand how medical journals are supposed to work is someone publishes a study or an article, and then, you know, and all scientists will say, you know, all models are wrong, and most studies start out with models. There's theories. They try to, you know, disprove the theory or however it goes. But these conversations in these papers afterwards is scientists weighing in. Well, hold on a second. Let me shoot a hole in your premise here, because I've got this study that I'd like you to reference, which is what exactly happened here, right? This scientist said, well, what about this flu study? Had a real placebo control group, really powerful study that showed a rise in these other upper respiratory infections. And then you now have Facebook. What is the scientific credibility of this fact checker, right? And as we know, you know, these fact checkers oftentimes are just, you know, whatever it is, the couple from Snopes, where some people go to get their fact checking done. But we're now seeing social media, and I guess media in general, interfering with the scientific process, which is, how about let the next scientist come on and say, well, actually, that study about the flu shot was disproven for these reasons or something. But you don't see, I don't think you see that there. That's what's supposed to happen. That's the natural dialogue. Social media, really social control, right? This is what we're talking about, is coming in and saying, no, we're not going to we don't want anyone to be able to see the conversation. You're not going to get to see both sides of the conversation. Again, that's the central principle of Fahrenheit 451, right? Burn all the books and then get a central message. We cannot have two ideas because people are too stupid to be able to take in two opposing views. The idea that this is happening in universities, right, and that it's happening in the intelligentsia, and we're accepting this. We're accepting a discussion on a medical journal being censored.
It goes in line with Americans' frontline doctors. We've watched fact checkers interfere with journalism for years, interfere with the journalistic process of investigating stories, and now we're watching them, like you said, interfere with the scientific method. Where does this end? The medical community needs to stand up. This doesn't end well. We saw it with the American frontline doctors. We see it with hydroxychloroquine, and we're seeing it with convalescent plasma therapy as well. This doesn't end well. People need to stand up, especially in the medical community.
Do you think that's going to happen? I mean, do you think that they're overplaying their hand, whoever the they is, whatever this controlling body is, whoever's behind the Zuckerbergs and them? Do you think that they're actually maybe making matters worse for themselves? Because I always think there are real scientists that were involved in that dialogue that say, wait a minute, what are you doing in this room? You're an idiot. Who let the ignoramus in this room to decide the conversation we're having? How many doctors and scientists are just saying, I'm sorry, you have no idea what the scientific process is, and you're destroying science. Is this waking up the scientific bodies that I think just signed off on the Tony Fauci's and the NIH and the statements by the FDA and you know, British Medical Journal or any others? Do you think it's waking up, you know, those smart scientists and doctors around the world?
I do believe so. Not to put down journalism at all, but you start screwing and censoring science, things that are really, I mean, in a laboratory under high scrutiny of research, which, you know, journalism is, but not to the, obviously not to the extent that the scientific method weighs things out. You start doing that, as we've seen, you're going to get a lot of people starting to stand up and tell the story, as we have with, you know, just the hydroxychloroquine story. You have a lot of doctors stepping up to defend that. And who knows, going back to the top of our segment here, maybe this is why the health officials are leaving, because we're talking numbers, we're talking science, and you start censoring that. very, very smart people, very influential people began to take notice. And that's when things start to happen. So this could be the straw that broke the camel's back.
When you look at Nazi Germany, you imagine, how many doctors defected, how, all these situations. At some point, people say, you know what, these aren't just lies, these aren't just fibs. People are going to die, and I'm not going to be a part of that. Great reporting, Jeffrey. Really super interesting, and all seem to really fit with our focus today. So keep up the great work, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks, Al.
All right. And for all of you that, still know how to read and care about reading, getting deep into a topic, definitely check out the Jackson Report at thehighwire.com. He writes about many of the topics that we are discussing. It's a great resource for breaking news. He's also able to get stories out before our Thursday show comes up, so you definitely want to be following the Jackson Report. Well, as I told you, today we are going to discuss, is there a world order? Is there, who's censoring who? Who's in control? Who is the they? What is going on? I have some really fascinating people to interview today. I want to start out with somebody that's been on this show before. As you know, our YouTube channel was taken down. Facebook is threatening. Twitter is on the ledge because, as we are seeing, fact-checking is real, and fact-checkers tend to be stupid. And, what do you do when we have an incorrect fact-check? What do I do if my YouTube channel is down? Can I sue? All of these things were actually warnings that came when I interviewed Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower, that said, man, they're already set up to start censoring everybody's free speech, whether it's medical discussions or political discussions. This is just a taste of that interview with Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower.
I got to work in one of the coolest projects in YouTube, which was to put YouTube on the TV. I started that in 2016, and 3 months after I started, Donald Trump won the election. Turned out that Google cared a lot. I started digging in the documents of the company that were available to all full-time employees, and what I found shocked me. They had defined fake news, and they were intent on censoring it. And so I'm like, well, if they're going to act as the judge, then how are they going to be the executioner? How are they going to execute the silencing of that fake news? And it turns out that they had a project for that. I caught Google deleting words out of their Arabic translation dictionary in order to make a Trump tweet sound crazy. And I realized at that point that this was sedition. And if this is sedition and I don't report it, then I am involved now with a conspiracy to commit sedition against a sitting president of the United States.
Well, it's my honor and pleasure to welcome back the Google whistleblower, Zach Voorhees. Zach, you're just the man I want to talk to. Things are getting crazy out here in social media land. So many people being censored and shut down, whether it's, discussions about medical freedom or certain drugs like hydroxychloroquine or political positions. But specifically, I want to talk about the high wire right now because, we've seen censorship like we've never seen it before. You used to work at YouTube, correct? I mean, you were directly involved in that department at Google. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I worked 3 years at YouTube, which is owned by Google.
So YouTube cut our channel really without any notice. I think we were all waiting for some sort of strike system that never happened. There was a couple of videos that got pulled unceremoniously, but they never said why. But then all of a sudden the channel came down. So to begin with, that's really, was a cautionary tale you put forward a year ago, at least. I think we were still in LA when you came on to the high wire last, and you were saying, look, they're going to start censoring people. This is something that has to be stopped. It's why you started speaking out. Are you surprised? Is it exactly how you thought all of this was going to go? Where is your state of mind right now as you're watching Google and YouTube and social media platforms slowly quieting different voices that are using those platforms?
Well, Del, I've been watching YouTube from the inside now for, 4 years. And 1 year ago, I knew the direction that they were going. And logically, I extrapolated out to where it was going to be. I knew that the censorship that they were doing before the election was insane. And I realized that the insanity would be cranked up to 11 when we got to the election. We have a few months before the next president is going to be selected. And what we see right now is the cranking up of the election interference, the cranking up of censorship to silence people that are critical of the establishment and the pharma cartels. And right now, you know, logically thinking, I believe that we are still in the calm before the storm. I believe that the censorship that's going to happen in the months of September and October and the beginning of November are going to be unlike anything we've ever seen before.
So when you say that, I was just reading an article somebody forwarded to me about Belarus right now is having a massive uprising. A president's been reelected, I understand, for the 26th year. No one believes that that's possible, marching in the streets. And we're now hearing all of their social media has been shut down. The internet has been shut down. They are not able to communicate. People can't communicate with their families. This was just happening a couple weeks ago. So what is that? Do we have that potential? I mean, when we live in the United States of America, we assume there's certain things that are going to be protected. I remember, you know, when Egypt had its uprising, what was celebrated is how Twitter was used amongst all the youth that kept marching the streets and finding out where the next march was going to be. They essentially overthrew a government, which we were celebrating here in the United States of America, right? Egypt fighting for its democracy. Twitter was a part of that whole story. Yet, you know, now you wonder, well, is it just if Twitter is on the same side? Do we risk watching all of our social media suddenly just black out on us? Will it go that far?
Yeah, and I think a really great model of understanding what's going to happen is when big tech is opposed to the government. I think like Bolivia and a lot of the Central and South American states are a good example. Like Bolivia had a total blackout right as the election took place. And then when the lights came back on, the deep state candidate was ahead. And that caused a lot of mayhem. And I think that that's essentially what they're going to try to do here in the United States. They're going to try to shut down everything in the last week, and then even more so in the last day. And I believe that there's going to be a surprise when the lights come back on. I believe that they're going to say, oh, well, look how much, you know, the Democratic candidate is like ahead in these certain battleground states. It's going to be very interesting going into the final stretch of this election campaign. And even if we have a presumed winner, with the whole mail-in ballot fiasco, there may be a push by the deep state to try to cast doubt into the election. I know that there was a election simulation that was held, and John Podesta played the part of Joe Biden. And one of the scenarios that played out in this election integrity project was how to cast enough doubt onto the system so that the West Coast states, Oregon, Seattle, and California could eventually succeed from the union and balkanize. And I think it's called the Election Integrity Project, and it just wrapped up. And it's interesting that they were doing a dry run of a succession scenario. And so that kind of shows you how infiltrated the left is with foreign actors, that they either win or they're going to break up the United States. And this is the level of meddling that we should expect to see.
So tell me about the politics. You were inside there, and I'm not choosing sides. You know, our show, we try to sort of, I'm politically marooned for the most part, very disenfranchised from the progressive liberal life that I was, you know, once a part of. But, you know, we hear Silicon Valley is very liberal. We hear that, you know, these computer companies, which I find sort of shocking. We're talking about, you know, when we talk about Zuckerberg, usually when someone's a billionaire, they tend to lean, have conservative leanings for tax issues and things like that. But can you give me a sense of the landscape? What is it about computer programming and technologies that seems to lean towards, a leftist perspective? Is it throughout, or is it just the power brokers? I mean, does a regular technician, or when you were in your job sitting, I'm imagining, with a bunch of other cubicles, does everybody tend to sort of be coming from a liberal perspective, and why would that be?
Well, I think that the term liberal has been abused a lot. I consider myself a classical liberal. I like individual freedom. And Google and these big tech companies really qualified themselves as liberals. It's all about you. And I mean, the company YouTube, it's in its namesake. It's about you and expressing yourself and, the freedom of expression. And when Google launched its initial public offering, one of its mission statements was to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Now that Donald Trump was elected president, they've decided to abandon all of that. And they've turned into a leftist authoritarian / progressive. I believe progressive means communist. So they're progressing towards some sort of socialism or communism state. And really, they've abandoned the whole thing about, liberalism. And there's a lot of tech employees that consider themselves liberal and, enjoyed what the internet was circa 2015 and before. And what's been happening is that those people have been pushed out of the companies, either by attrition, they find better opportunities other places, because, when you're in that elite circle, you have a lot of opportunity. Why wake up and go to a job that you hate for 8 hours a day? It's just not a good way to exist as an engineer. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those people have self-selected and removed themselves from these companies to go work at other startups and other smaller businesses where they have more freedom and things aren't as crazy. What that tends to do is that tends to leave behind the people that really don't see a problem with all the leftist authoritarianism that's going on right now. And as a result, you've got this group mentality where if the consensus of everyone that's sticking around is, hey, this is okay, then the people that don't believe that are going to stick out more than ever. And this is how I found myself in the company, is that all the people that were liberals were moving away, and, they were being replaced by actually a lot of Chinese nationals. And I think it was like 30% of my team was Chinese when I started at Google. And then when I left, it was like, it flipped. It was like 70% Chinese. And they've got a different value structure. And so it's not just that they're finding Americans that are progressive. It's actually that they're getting these H-1B visa people that have no connection to our culture, no connection to the Constitution, which makes this country great. And they're willing to bulldoze over all of the freedoms that we hold dear, because if they don't, they're going to be deported back to their country. And that's just the truth of it.
Now, there's several things that I felt like were happening, but you sound like a conspiracy theorist when you say it. Some of the things we found was this idea of shadow banning, okay? I don't know exactly what that means, but we certainly, when our video would play on YouTube or Facebook, there's times where people keep saying, I just can't share it. Yet somebody else is saying, oh, I'm sharing it fine, as though certain people are isolated. It's almost like they comb through and just stop, parts of it. Does that happen? Is that just in our imagination when people feel like they're being blocked and others aren't, and so we're comparing ourselves to each other? Is there some function inside of these companies where they can throttle just certain percentages of your followers or things like that? Or are we just in Crazyville thinking that that's going on?
So, Del, the answer is yes. And what I'm going to tell you right now is going to take you from being a conspiracy theorist and make you a conspiracy realist. In fact, shadow banning has been leaked to the public, especially with Twitter. There was a hack that happened few weeks ago where a bunch of high influence, high follower count individuals had their credentials hacked. And these hackers were able to get inside of Twitter and not only take over these accounts, but also leak images to the press of the shadow banning that was taking place within what's called an admin panel. So it's an administrative panel that insiders at Twitter were able to access. And one of these was a trends blackout classification. So they could attach a tag that says, oh, this individual, don't allow them to hit the trending section. And we've known about this for a while, that there was some sort of suppression going on. There were, the trends section of Twitter is pretty simple. You add up the number of hashtags that you have for a particular tweet, and then you rank all those hashtags and you figure out which ones are the top in the last hour, and those make it to the top of the trends. And so certain things were allowed to trend, and certain things involved in the exposure of this deep state that's been going on. A lot of it with Jeffrey Epstein, a lot of it with his island, a lot of it was with Clinton and their involvement and all that. That stuff wasn't allowed to trend. And this was especially poignant with Project Veritas and a lot of their things, of their exposures of big tech censorship, that was not allowed to trend either. And so Twitter had been in denial that the shadow banning existed, but once the admin panel was released to the public and images of that were finally seen, that's when we realized that, okay, here's the concrete evidence that we have, that there is definitely shadow banning, going on with Twitter. We've had the Facebook whistleblowers, Ryan and Zach, saying that, yeah, there's shadow banning going on all the time. We were involved in that. And so, yeah, you're not a conspiracy theorist. You're nailing it. Shadow banning happens all the time. It's just one of the multi-way things that big tech uses in order to silence people that are critical of big tech, silence conservatives, silence the supporters of Donald Trump, and anyone that they don't like or don't want to have a voice.
Another thing that happened, I want to ask you about this because you may or may not know, but when our channel came down with YouTube, we said to everybody, we put out a video everywhere we could, go over to our website. Well, our website crashed during the show when everybody left YouTube and went over and watched on our website. And then a couple days later, we got our analytics. We thought we had crashed because usually YouTube, our live viewership's around 5,000 live views. But then when we looked at our analytics on our own website, we crashed because 221,000 people tried to watch the show all at one time. We have been suspecting that YouTube and Facebook are not necessarily letting us see our actual numbers, that we really have this feeling that we're reaching more people than we're seeing, and there's been times where we're in two different parts of the country watching one of our videos or something, and we both see a different viewer number. Are these things manipulated? Are they manipulating, maybe not necessarily who can and can't see it, but who we're being told are seeing it? Is that a part of the process?
Yeah, and Tim Pool has been exposing that a lot of the numbers are faked for a while. Usually it's faked upwards, so people think that they've got more reach than they do. It's certainly possible that they're switching it the other way so that you can see less people than you actually do. I've actually been inside of YouTube and seen a very popular video take off, and then right before my eyes, 90% of the likes were removed from a video. Let's say that a normal, because what happens for a normal video is you get around like 1 to 3% of the people will click like. That's a good ratio.
Yeah.
If it's 3%, that's like, doing really well. This one video had a 10% like ratio. And in the span, and I just kept on seeing it go up and go up and go up. And then finally went up to like something like 10,000. And then the next morning it was down to like 1,000. And it was just like, wow, like they removed all the likes. And the reason why was because this video had a counter narrative that was very powerful. And so, this is one of the ways that YouTube goes in there and, and will reduce the apparent virality, because those metrics, when people interact with your video, that tells the algorithm to propagate the video outwards and show it to more people. So if they remove the likes from the video, that means that your video is essentially shadow banned. And so, yes, this happens on many of the platforms that are out there. Also, there's a known attack called a distributed denial of service, where a bunch of zombie computers will go and hit one computer with as much traffic as they can to try to overload it and knock it offline. And so what you may have seen is that you may have seen legitimate traffic, or you may have seen legitimate traffic mixed in with the denial of service, so that your message would, be taken off the internet, at least temporarily.
Interesting. All right, let me ask you this then, because these are all questions that people are mailing in. They're asking, but we have serious questions about if you have a site like the High Wire that's really, we were exploding on YouTube this year. I think we started the year, we had been focused on Facebook and everyone else. YouTube this year, I think we started around 20 or 30,000 followers. I don't know where we are when we got kicked off, nearing 200,000 followers and going up. But if you're a company that, let's say, YouTube doesn't like, do they allocate is there somebody actually watching my show and saying, he said hydroxychloroquine, he said don't wear a mask, take the show down? Or are they really, is it all just trusting a computer algorithm that's watching us? I mean, is there enough manpower at YouTube, for instance, to watch certain channels, or is it all just done with computers?
So when I was at YouTube, I saw an internal review system that was mostly powered by AI. And what it does is it looks at the content of your stream and then generates a closed caption, right? So it translates what you say into a text file.
Yeah.
That text file is then mined for keywords. And so if you were to say, HCQ or, plandemic or scamdemic, those sorts of words are going to trigger an AI system to notify a human reviewer that's going to then come on and review your video to see whether it needs to be flagged and demonetized or removed completely. When YouTube demonetizes a video, the justification that they use for taking that video down is that it's brand unsafe. And so this is a lot of the times what you're seeing is, when you see a video demonetized, is that it's being automatically demonetized by the algorithms because you said some trigger word which the AI has identified as problematic.
So then let me ask you, this is really, this is super informative. I appreciate you getting into the details. Is there a way to hide? I see people are doing things like, even if they type vaccine, but instead of using 2 C's or once was 2 X's, now they're putting in, money signs or things like that. Do those things actually trip up that AI? I've also had people say to me, Del, stop saying your name and don't say the High Wire, because those are being set as flags. So if you avoid mentioning yourself, the AI won't pick you up as easily. So I guess the question is, are there ways for us to hide if we're going to continue to try and get our information out on our YouTube or our Facebook channels? Can you outsmart the AI?
Absolutely. You can outsmart the AI, and your intuition is correct. Swapping out letters for different characters is a great way to prevent the censorship AI from detecting what it is that you're typing. With text, it's a little bit easier for the AI to be able to figure out what the content is because it doesn't have to parse it into text. On-screen text is a lot more difficult because it has to do optical character recognition and then translate a text file from the on-screen stuff. So, for example, what you have right here is the High Wire. Let's see if there's my finger. Okay, so the High Wire, right? So the AI is going to see that, and it's going to be able to pull the text out of that and then do some sort of classification of what that means. Now, if you've got complex graphics, or you've swapped out the S for a dollar symbol, then that's going to make it a lot harder for the AI to be able to figure out what's going on. Especially if you've got, like in your case of the high wire, you've got sort of a strike going through it. These are all things that make it so that the AI has much more difficulty in detecting what it is that you're saying, which is the reason why a lot of the content producers that are talking about this thing are now using code words in order to escape the censors. My friend Kent Heckenlively made a video which he was talking in code about how masks were raising the CO2 levels for the individuals that were wearing them. And his whole video was about how how he was being able to get past the censors by talking in code. And his video went to, I think it was like close to 1 million, if not 1 million. Before that, they took it down, and then he gave a letter out by his lawyer for cease and desist, and Google was able to restore his video and bring it back up. And so, these are all tricks that people are doing right now. I think it's got sort of a time limited value. The AI seems to be increasing at an exponential rate, so I think it's going to work for the next few months. But come this time next year, I don't think that anything's going to be able to really escape these AI systems. They're just getting so much better, and the computation requirements for doing processing is also going down a lot. Every single year, it seems like we're 10 times better at AI than we were the year before. And I expect that trend to just keep on continuing accelerating and not really slowing down for the foreseeable future.
So we're coming into an election. I think it may be one of the most contentious elections in American history. Never before has, I think, this nation been as divided as it feels right now. When you feel like one side maybe does have all the tech in their pocket, what are things that people can do to prepare for a future blackout or for a shutdown by social media? I know many of us are praying that someone, that doesn't believe in censorship will create a competitive platform. But are there things that we can do to prepare to be able to communicate, since we do communicate using the internet, should and when this thing get really ugly come, October, November?
My suggestion for people that are looking to prevent the censorship and keep a line of communication open, and I get asked this question by actually billionaires that are looking for an alternative. And my suggestion is to use multiple messenger services in hopes that at least one of them will continue to stay live through all stages of the unrest that are coming our way, especially in late October and early November. So for messaging, it's going to be Telegram and Signal. And the reason why I say that is because Telegram is a big destination now as a backup for Facebook and Messenger. I use them all the time. I love Telegram. Signal isn't as clean and isn't as full featured, but it's apparently more encrypted. I also like to use Gab and Parler. Gab is the one that has the strongest protection of free speech. Parler is not as much as Gab in terms of its protections, but they seem to be way better than, say, Twitter. I expect Twitter and Facebook and the messenger services tied to Google to just essentially be non-functional for a week before the election. That's my prediction. So if people out there are looking to maintain these communication lines, SMS, Telegram, and Signal, and also email. And the email client that I recommend is using Proton Mail that features end-to-end encryption when you're talking with another Proton Mail account. And I think that one of those is at least going to be able to survive the coming blackout.
That's great information. So, Zach, I know you are on the front lines of this. You stepped up, you spoke out, much like the work that I do. We have a big legal team that goes after information, tries to make changes where we see real problems with either vaccine safety or drug safety or chemical exposures. This is the work we're doing. And if you want to support our lawsuits and our ongoing work that our nonprofits involved in, you can support that. You can help us do all of this work by simply going to icandecide.org. No one else funds us but you. We're asking for $20 for 2020. Just donate to ICANN. Make it a recurring donation. If you can't, afford the $20 a month, which is really about 4 lattes, cut back on the lattes and go ahead and send us $20 a month. But even if it's $1 a month, it helps us do the work we're doing. I want to get that all out there. All right. But you are launching a lawsuit against YouTube, I understand. You want to tell us just very quickly what you have going on and how maybe those of us watching can help?
Yeah. So I am launching a class action lawsuit against YouTube. We want to expand it to the rest of big tech, but we found a grievance class that we believe will be the seed and the way to open up a crack in the fortress that Google has built against what's called electronic discovery. And so our campaign is called Stop Bit Burning. And the reason why we call it Stop Bit Burning is because the fascists of 100 years ago were burning books. And the fascists still exist, but today they're not burning books, they're burning bits. Every single time a YouTube video is demonetized, every single time a website is delisted from the internet, every single time a profile is shadow banned. These are all examples of bits being burned. And so we're going to stop this bit burning with our campaign, stopbitburning.com. And essentially what we're doing is we're collectivizing all of the YouTube influencers that are being demonetized and being shadow banned and being outright banned. We've got some really big names. We've got Mike Adams of Natural News. We've got you, Del Bigtree, that's supporting us. We've got Sean of SGT Report. We've got many, many more high-profile influencers that are signing up and supporting us and getting their testimony on record. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be launching a crowdfunding campaign in order to publicly fund this lawsuit. We've got a very high-profile lawyer that is interested in taking the case. She is out there and she is very visible in the public sphere. And she's close to the president. And we believe that this is a winning strategy. And we believe that, and really what we want to do is we want to be the first to be second. Like right now, there's a lot of confusion about whether Section 230 applies for big tech. That's the liability shield. And President Trump in June said that this shield was still active. But right now, we're looking at the FCC to clarify about whether big tech still has these liability protections because, their end of the bargain was that they weren't going to do viewpoint-based censorship. And they violated that blatantly. And we thought that Section 230 might not apply already, but it's looking like it kind of is. But, the FCC is reviewing that. Also, there's a lawsuit by Steve Wozniak who is suing YouTube because they were using his likeness in order to perpetrate a Bitcoin scam. And they were doing this for like 2 or 3 months. And he technically can't sue Google and win because of this liability shield, but he's going along with it anyways. And so either one of these two things are going to happen, either the FCC clarifying or Steve Wozniak being able to strip the Section 230 away, is going to provide us the opportunity for this class action suit to come into full effect. And so once that happens, once that is clear, we're going to launch this thing and we're going to go big. Right now, it's proving very popular with the public. And even more so, it's proving popular with a small group of high net worth individuals that really want to see this brought to trial and to see Google sort of be, sued, with this class action lawsuit, because something needs to be done, Del. Google's out of control. Twitter's out of control. Facebook's out of control. And what we hope to do is once these people, once we have this initial win, then we can open it up, because there's also the stockholders. Like Google literally came to power under the promise that they were going to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And the stockholders invested in that, believing that was going to be the case. Google got big using that. They told the media that. They told everyone that. But essentially, they betrayed all of those people. And those stockholders have, I believe, a claim against Google. And we'd like to see this lawsuit expand to their shareholders. So for any of you that are interested in seeing more about what our strategy is, I urge you to go to our campaign website, stopbitburning.com. And you can see our video, you can see who signed up. And I really want you to sign up for our newsletter so you can see our drip campaign of the people that are signing up. We're releasing a video right now about once a week. And, when we go live on this campaign, we expect this to be, one of the big things, one of the big news events that's going to happen for the week that it launches. And then it's going to continue to be a strong driver of news for the rest of the year.
Fantastic, Zach. That's awesome. I love that you're on it. We are eyeball deep in many lawsuits across the country, so it's nice to know that, you're in there in the trenches with us, fighting some of the things that we can't put our focus on. We're here to support you, so I look forward to more updates as you move into that. These are crazy times. Though these are private companies, these are now highways that we are all driving on. In fact, there's very little other place to drive, and I think that starts changing this story of whether this is public or private. So hopefully you're second in line, as you put it, to try and really make a difference. And I appreciate all of your advice. And for people that want to get involved, definitely check out stopbitburning.com. Zach, thank you for your time. Thank you for being a warrior. And I look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you so much, Del. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
All right, take care. Well, before there was Zach Voorhees, the Google whistleblower who we're just speaking to, there was Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning. You remember them? If you don't, take a look at this.
Julian Assange, champion of transparency or criminal?
People calling Manning a whistleblower, others a traitor.
Arguably America's most wanted fugitive, NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden.
No one wants to be a whistleblower. This is something that's hard to do.
The public remains divided over Assange. But in the eyes of the Pentagon, he's an enemy of the state and therefore a wanted man.
There are a lot of people that want him in prison, a lot of very powerful people.
WikiLeaks has provoked the U.S. government for more than a decade, leaking troves of classified documents and videos online.
Julian Assange showed real bravery in being willing to publish, frankly and fearlessly, that video.
The 47-year-old had been wanted by British police since 2012, when he skipped bail and sought asylum at the embassy to escape extradition to Sweden.
Bradley Manning said he had wanted to shine a light on government misconduct. Prosecutors say he recklessly betrayed his uniform, leaking sensitive material in order to gain notoriety.
It was the largest leak of military secrets in American history.
Some 700,000 documents, U.S. diplomatic cables, and classified battlefield reports from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, passed on to WikiLeaks.
A military judge has now sentenced Army Private Bradley Manning to 35 years in prison.
Manning was convicted on 20 of 22 charges, including espionage, computer fraud, and the wanton publication of intelligence on the internet.
We call those types of people that are willing to risk, not be a martyr, but to risk being a martyr for all the rest of us. We call those people heroes. Bradley Manning is a hero.
The high school dropout who worked his way into the most secretive computers of the U.S. intelligence community as a defense contractor, and then blew open those secrets by leaking unprecedented details of top-secret government surveillance programs.
His revelations exposed systemic government surveillance of civilians here and abroad, a disclosure that both enraged and embarrassed the American intelligence community.
These officials have had every opportunity to show evidence that harm came as a result, and they haven't. We're a country that was born from an act of treason against a government that had run out of control. But we should always make a distinction that right and wrong is a very different standard than legal and illegal.
Snowden insists the only thing damaged by his disclosures was the reputation of the intelligence community. Edward Snowden was charged under the Espionage Act and faces up to 30 years in prison if he returns to the U.S.
This has done unnecessary damage to U.S. intelligence capabilities and U.S. diplomacy.
This is America. When something goes wrong, don't we want somebody to stand up and say something about it?
All the characters in that montage are some of the most controversial political, media, whistleblower figures that the world has seen, at least during my lifetime. None of those people are coming on to speak with me today, but in fact, I'm going to be talking to the man that is the reason we know who they are. The PR mind behind Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning. I'm talking about none other than Trevor Fitzgibbon, whose Fitzgibbon Media has been behind some of the biggest stories the world has ever seen. He joins me now. Trevor, it's an honor to have you joining us today. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Del. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be on your show.
Cool.
I do want to take issue just with that wonderful introduction, which was over the top. If I can be clear, all I simply did was help facilitate Edward Snowden's disclosures to the media, and if it wasn't me, it would have been somebody else. You know, so I want to be crystal clear that somebody like Edward Snowden and certainly Julian Assange clearly can stand on their own. I feel like it was a great privilege and honor, and I feel lucky to have helped in whatever small way I helped. But, you know, Julian and WikiLeaks is the most consequential organization, I would say, in world history. And they certainly didn't need me to make them who they are and what they are. I simply, in the United States, with WikiLeaks and Assange and Julian, they were my client, and I oversaw and implemented their media in the United States and their PR. And I did that for Chelsea Manning as well. When Chelsea Manning was Bradley Manning at Quantico, that was literally my first client when I started my firm in 2009. And then when Chelsea was moved from Quantico to Fort Leavenworth, at Leavenworth, I also handled Chelsea's PR and set up her Twitter account. I was with Chelsea at Leavenworth the night before my twin boys were born, who are 5 now. And she would call me every night from Leavenworth and dictate tweets to me that we would then tweet out. My firm would then tweet out the next day. So thank you for your introduction, but these folks all stand on their own. I provided a service and did it as best as I can to help get their message injected into the national political media and internationally too.
All right. Well, I appreciate the clarification, and I understand what you're saying, and I have to say, you know, I come at this from a little different perspective in that, you know, I don't put myself on any level with any of these people we're talking about, but I have seen the headlines about the work that I've done, a controversial documentary, being kicked out of, you know, Tribeca Film Festival. There's really, when you're in the middle of those things, and I come from television, right? I come from CBS. I was a producer on the CBS talk show. But when you are under attack, which is what I experienced back in the early 2016 with the release of the documentary Vaxxed, you can't find a PR person that either wants to touch you or knows how to deal with you. Most of the time, they're trying to put out the fire. They're trying to say, and I kept saying, no, I don't want the fire out. This is all about being on fire, but I need a PR person to be bold enough to know where to go, to know what, you know, even if it's, you know, reporters on the inside that are, you know, want to attack the story. But there is, I know there's a talent because in many ways I haven't found that PR person to help me, and so a lot of it's been on my own, you know.
I'm right
Yeah,
here.
okay. All right, perfect.
No,
We'll talk about that later. But so let me ask you, so let's all that aside. You know, how do you get to be the go-to PR person for, as you described it, WikiLeaks, maybe one of the greatest media stories, as you said, in world history. What in your background led you into this? How did you find yourself working with these incredibly controversial entities?
Well, my mom was an organizer for SDS, Students for a Democratic Society. So as a kid, I guess it was a bit in my blood, and I always believed in the idea of justice and human rights. So that was my mom, who was very much so a progressive, and she's the best, and she's in her 80s now. But so she shaped me quite a bit. My dad was a salesman, so I think kind of the two of those things, for Brown Shoe Company. So I think the two of those things merged well to create a PR person, because I believed, and I still believe, and I only take clients that I believe in, number one. And when I believe in something, I don't even think of it as work. It's more of an extension of who I am as a person, and I am a social person. I like to talk to people. I want to be everybody's friend. I want people to like me, and I don't think of it as selling a story. I just think of it as the world has to understand what's happening and needs to know about Chelsea Manning, know about what happened, how she was being stripped naked every night at Quantico, how she was held for months in a 6x8 foot cage before she was actually put in Quantico. She had no due process. She was held in quasi-solitary confinement. So we blew that story up, what was happening to Chelsea. And PJ Crowley, longtime State Department spokesperson for then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, was actually caught with an open mic saying that he believed the military's treatment of Manning was, quote, stupid and counterproductive. And that got out and led to PJ Crowley, who, depending who you ask, was either fired or forced to resign. I think that's the first time I got under Hillary's skin.
And when you say that, I mean, you were, your mother, as you said, was a progressive, an active progressive liberal, I guess. Did you consider yourself, when you got involved in these stories, were you identifying as a progressive liberal?
100%. And, I was a communications director, just for a primary, right, in New Mexico. Of course, we lost. It was really close. But yeah, for Obama, during the primary against Hillary, I was a communications director just in that state. And, it wasn't this big job. It was for a short time. But, I believed in Obama at the time. And, I believed what he said in his speeches, and he used to herald and trumpet whistleblowers like Daniel Ellsberg. But then he's elected, and I start my firm, and I come to realize that the Obama administration, prosecuted more whistleblowers and journalists than every single administration in U.S. history, including Donald Trump. And in many ways, that Obama took some of the worst policies of the Bush administration, including JSOC, Joint Special Operation Command, targeted killings, assassinations, a drone program, even non-declared war zones, the Philippines, etc., and put that stuff on steroids. And no one was holding him accountable. And then when Edward Snowden, blows the whistle on the unconstitutional domestic spying operation, where, not just terror suspects where they get FISA warrants, but every single American citizen was being spied on by the NSA without a warrant, without anything, just wholesale domestic spying. That happened under Obama. And I realized that, you know, prior to starting my firm, I had been in another place, and I worked for 8 years against the Bush administration during the run-up to the war in Iraq, and to push back against the Bush administration, what I consider one of the greatest psyops on a domestic population, which was the war in Iraq, and conflating 9/11 with a need to invade Iraq. You know, there were no Iraqis on that plane, right? But they were from Saudi Arabia. Like, we didn't invade Saudi Arabia, right? So,
right.
But depending on, you know, at any time back then, depending on what poll you looked at, you know, 50% of the American people believed that Iraq had something to do with 9/11, and it was a lot, and it was a very orchestrated, strategic PR effort. So, I fought against that stuff for 8 years when Bush was president, and then Obama gets elected, and I realized that the same people, brothers and sisters, man, that I was standing next to, fighting in the trenches day in, day out to hold the Bush administration accountable. Well, now we have Obama, and some of that stuff is far worse under Obama than it was under Bush. But I looked around, and not only were none of them there or willing to call Obama out, but there was actual hostility towards me and towards the firm and towards the work I was doing.
Wow.
And then you throw in WikiLeaks, and I think we had started to get fairly good at mainstreaming him politically. You know, we were getting Julian on Meet the Press, on This Week with Stephanopoulos, and getting his attorney, Michael Ratner, who was my mentor, getting his attorney's op-eds running in like USA Today. It was a threat. And I realized that the people I worked with that labeled themselves as progressives, they weren't true progressives. Or if they were progressives, it was not what I thought it was. It was a corporatist DNC party. That was the loyalty, was to the Democratic Party. And my loyalty has always been, was then, and has always been to truth and justice. The last thing I'll just say is, you know, as a kid, in what shaped me, you know, I was a lousy student. I had severe ADD, I still do. Dyslexia, I could write my name faster backwards than frontwards. I failed 4th grade. I couldn't do a book report, you know, that was difficult for me. But at 12 years old, I could tell you everything you wanted to know about the CIA's involvement in El Salvador and Oscar Romero's assassination. So kind of strange, right? But that's how I wound up here, you know?
Right. When we talk about these stories, and even when I think about, you know, I was asking my staff, where do you think our audience is at when we're going to be talking about Julian Assange, Edward Snowden? Obviously, there's a divide. Some people see these entities as heroes, Chelsea Manning. Others say that they are tearing the fabric of America. These were, you know, there is a need for privacy in the CIA. We can't have, you know, all of our secrets out there, or we lose our, you know, strength as a world power. Was there any part of this or any time that you checked in and said, this really may be crossing a line for me? Was there, you know, an issue? I mean, are you wired to think, I could do damage to the United States of America by helping these stories get out there?
I never thought of it that way. For me, it was always, I mean, when I look at Chelsea Manning and what she did, when I certainly look at WikiLeaks and Julian Assange and what they do, and certainly Edward Snowden, I mean, as a proud American patriot, you know, I believe these people are truth tellers. And as the case with Chelsea Manning and as the case with Edward Snowden, I think the actions they took were the most patriotic actions and risks that someone could take. You know, Edward Snowden, you know, the Espionage Act was created to prosecute people who, spies, people who are selling America's secrets to enemies of the U.S., etc. That's not what Chelsea Manning did. That's not what Edward Snowden did. They took a direct action in the public interest. Chelsea Manning felt the American people have a right to know the truth about what's happening in Iraq. Edward Snowden thought the American people had a right to know what its government was doing to it domestically. And I certainly believe that as well. And Snowden, I'm totally going to fumble this, but he says it much more eloquently than I do. But when, and I was so impressed with this when he broke the news and went public, and he went public like as himself. He didn't try to hide or anything. You listen to what he said, and you listen to his core beliefs and who he is, and somebody who tried to join the Army Rangers, somebody who signed up out of patriotism and love for the country. He simply said, as our founding father said, you cannot have a functioning democracy if the citizenry does not know what its government is doing to it.
Mm.
And sure enough, he's a defender of the Constitution, and sure enough, what he exposed was ruled by the federal courts as an unconstitutional program. And you had Obama out there saying that what he did, or the program and this information, was important information, but it wasn't his role to bring awareness to it. And then I'm sitting here laughing because the only reason, if it was up to former President Obama, no one would have known about it.
Right.
The only reason we know about it is because of what Snowden did. When you look at the number of civilians, right, that were killed in Iraq, American taxpayers are funding this stuff. They have a right to know the truth about what we're doing. And I think that isn't anti-American. I think that is pro-America and pro-Americans. I think the public and the American people have a right to know. And as Snowden said, I agree with him. If you have a terror suspect or some people that are unsavory that you need to keep an eye out on because they could be a cell of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS, whatever, of course, do what you need to do, right? But that's why we have a FISA court, right? But the idea that every American citizen in the United States is going to be spied on without their knowledge is outrageous to me.
It takes a special type of person to be a Chelsea Manning or an Edward Snowden, Julian Assange. These people know they are really stepping in front of a freight train of world powers. Did you ever think, as the PR person, that simply taking their words and getting it to the media entities that would share it or helping get the story out there, was there ever a concern that somehow you would be putting yourself in jeopardy, or any legal issues?
I mentioned a person named Michael Ratner who passed away, but he was my mentor. He was the co-founder of the Center for Constitutional Rights, which is an outstanding legal organization based out of New York. I would check in with him, and he would check with other attorneys as to whether or not I was in any legal jeopardy. And to be clear, I did the PR technically, like my contract was with the Julian Assange Legal Defense Fund, okay? But I never knew anything WikiLeaks was going to put out until it had already put it out. And my job was to amplify it and to make sure that key strategic journalists saw the information, and that's what I did. I felt protected. I was naive to what the blowback would be, and but I'm proud of the work I did. I don't regret that work. I'm going to continue doing that work with other truth tellers. I look at you and I have so much admiration. I look at a person like Cheryl Atkinson or Lara Logan.
Yeah.
I look at James Risen, and I look at journalists such as Glenn Greenwald, who has to live in Brazil for safety reasons, and because of the journalism that he does and his stories. And now that he's working to take down the government of Brazil on corruption, now he has to worry about being there. I believe in it. I support getting the truth out, and I hope to always continue doing that work.
So take me to the point where, I mean, at one moment in your career, you're working directly with Media Matters, an institution now that's written multiple headlines about me. Just a few weeks ago, anti-vaccine figure Del Bigtree is using Facebook and YouTube to encourage people to intentionally contract coronavirus, saying things like, I'm spreading deadly misinformation. These were friends of yours, Media Matters, MoveOn.org. A lot of these institutions, I imagine you're there as they're forming. What is the point at which they turn on you? I mean, the Snowden stories are out there, Chelsea Manning's. It seems like it's all going fine. When did things really start to shift? You said you're on the radar. When did you suddenly get off the radar? We're going to get into sort of what happened, but what do you feel like really triggered a shift against you by the people that were normally have been considered your allies?
You know, I started my PR firm in 2009 from Washington, D.C. You know, we lived in a not wealthy part of D.C. from a little small row house, right? And I started from my couch, and I just slowly started to grow until I realized that, you know, eventually my wife was like, you know, Trevor, I think you need to find some office space because it's kind of weird having people just come to the house every day for work. so we got our first, I got my first office above, you know, like in El Salvador and hair salon in Columbia Heights, DC, right? And I had 12 staff. But our work spoke for itself. And you know, when I look back now at articles, when I was taken down, you know, the firm was described as you know, one of the best, if not the best, when it came at the work that we did. But we started to grow. We grew even more. I hired more staff, had 30 staff with offices in different parts of the country. I didn't do the hiring. I hired a managing director who at the time I really thought had my best interest. And my wife, you know, said, listen, as soon as your firm starts to make it, I just promised we could get the hell out of Washington, D.C. And so I moved in 2011, very early, you know, and we moved to Virginia. And I was maybe in the office one day a week. And I wasn't there on a day-to-day basis. And while our firm grew, the staff grew, the client list grew to 70 clients. While I would talk with them every once in a while and kind of touch base with them and help them a little bit with messaging, all my attention was spent on working with the Snowden disclosures, WikiLeaks, Venezuela, working with Ecuador against Chevron, and I just say I guess I was just kind of tuned out a little bit to all the other stuff we were doing. And I had some dissension of staff, you know, there were some senior vice presidents who worked for me who were angry and did not like Julian.
What were they angry about?
They didn't like Julian or WikiLeaks. They didn't like the work that we were doing then.
From my perspective, jumping in here, you were representing people that ultimately released internal emails. We're still seeing document dumps that are really affecting the Democratic Party, especially when you look at the Hillary Clinton emails.
Yeah.
Were the people working for you thinking they were working for, you know, a progressive Democrat, you know, PR firm? And how did that affect your firm when these things, that are being released now by your clients are actually nuclear bombs inside of the Democrat Party?
Well, clearly not well. But I was always crystal clear, though, as whatever voice I had within the progressive movement, and certainly the staff knew, what they were signing up for. And people enjoy doing that type of work when they're paid to do that kind of work, is one of the things I learned.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's a narrative that is a winning narrative and accepted and popular. But when it goes south, they're the first to abandon the principles and values of what the firm stood on, and to buy into a false narrative. And I think in my case, much of it was unwittingly. Do I think every single person at my firm was part of some conspiracy to take me? Of course not. Absolutely not. But if you look at the history, and if you look at the history of tactics used to take down voices of dissent in this country, it often takes one believable story to be able to create and perpetuate and drive a false narrative to destroy somebody.
All right. And
then,
obviously, look, Trevor, I know you're being very careful. You're having to be very careful about this conversation. Go ahead.
I understand. But let me also just say this, that there were documents released as well. The Palantir documents and H.B. Gary documents that were leaked, that actually mentions all of my clients were targets by a private security firm that was hired by the CIA and the FBI and the NSA to target and take down specific individuals who were all my clients and organizations. And that's public. And Cheryl Atkinson actually showed them on camera. And the allegations that were made against me, the identical allegations, were made against my clients.
Right.
And, Jacob Applebaum, who did work with WikiLeaks, and, at the time of his allegations against him, he was working on the kill list from the Obama administration. At my going down, I was working on the Snowden Treaty, which was to get other governments around the world to embrace and endorse a treaty against surveillance, illegal surveillance of populations. And as you know, Assange was falsely accused of sex crimes in Sweden that were dropped. And in all of our cases, there's such commonality.
We see the same story, as you're saying, sexual harassment allegations, sexual assault allegations that we obviously, Julian Assange, we saw that take place. And then the Huffington Post, this is 2015, the disturbing story of widespread sexual assault allegations at a major progressive PR firm. Fitzgibbon Media, prominent progressive public relations firm, abruptly shut down on Thursday amid allegations of sexual harassment and assault by the company's president. Trevor Fitzgibbon and his team worked with some of the biggest progressive organizations, including NARAL, Move On, the Center for American Progress. It goes on and on and on. Obviously, you came under the worst types of allegations, especially in the world today, and rightfully so. Should these things be taking place, I'd be the first to say that people need to be arrested. Everybody should be treated fairly in the workplace. Now, those allegations took place. They were devastating. They destroyed your PR firm, and like anyone else, you fought back. You got a lawyer. You defended yourself, and I also want to point out, because I'm not sure how much of this you can get into, but, you know, as Cheryl Atkinson reported, shades of gray, a disturbing follow-up to our story on allegedly false sex charges. And what has now happened, and people need to know this, is, you know, you've been in court, you've dealt with this. I recognize you can't talk about it because of the settlements, but I did see this tweet that came out from, I'm assuming is the accuser, writing, since June 2019, I've been involved in litigation with Trevor Fitzgibbon in EDVA. We've settled the case. As part of the settlement, I retract all statements I've made about Trevor Fitzgibbon and apologize for any harm I've caused Mr. Fitzgibbon and his family. I have no further comments. She even attaches these signed documents from the court. Now, normally in the world, that means you've been exonerated, that we recognize that for some reason there was a, you know, incorrect allegations made against you, whether or not they were political or personal. We know that you have, you know, had the court rule in your favor, and a step beyond that, the person involved apologizing. Yet, it really hasn't shifted the perspective of all of the news agencies and media places and groups that you once worked with. Am I correct in saying that? Are you still finding that you haven't been forgiven, though the courts have exonerated you under these circumstances?
That would be a fair description. I was going to say earlier in describing what happened to me and others, Jacob Applebaum, Julian, as you know, and others. The three things that we have in common: one, allegations made of the same, similar types of crimes. Number two, no charges ever filed against us. Number three, and it's four things actually. Number three, retracted allegations eventually. And then number four, reputation destruction. And that, I would argue, was really the goal, was, you know, for whatever reason, someone or something or some entity did not want Jacob doing the work he was doing, did not want Julian doing the work WikiLeaks did and publishing the work he was publishing, and they did not want me doing the work I did. And, you know, it is one of the oldest tactics that can be used against somebody, because, you know, pedophilia, sex crimes, those two things, accusing somebody of either of those two things are when you're clearly innocent, it doesn't matter. The allegations alone are enough to destroy somebody. I was investigated by the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney for more than a year on the allegations that were made against me. And I received a letter from DOJ that announced that they were closing all investigations of me and declining to pursue any action against me. They're not going to come out and say, innocent, you know, they just don't roll that way.
Right.
And it was pretty extraordinary that I even got a letter. But 48 hours or 72 hours after that letter was made public, that I essentially had been cleared, another press release goes out, signed by 72 of all my former clients and national progressive organizations, pledging to never hire or work with me again, blacklisting me, after I had just been cleared by the Department of Justice and U.S. Attorney. And I think the failure of journalists who, you know, when you're accused, every journalist under the sun will write stories based on the allegations, as though you're guilty of it all. It's a difficult position to be in because you can't defend yourself.
Well, it breaks the system, right? Our American system is you're innocent till proven guilty. In these situations, you're guilty till proven innocent. and it's now upon you to prove your innocence versus the opposite. But then
But the
even
issue is
upon
that
innocence, you know.
But you can't find a journalist, a mainstream journalist who wrote the stories about you back when you were falsely accused and wrote the stories as if you were guilty of it all. Good luck trying to get any of them to even update their stories, let alone write a news story about actually maybe sometimes there's a rush to judgment because after due process, it turns out the person making the allegation retracts everything they said, pays out, and apologizes to the person. They don't want to cover that because I think that's an admission that they were wrong. And I also just think culturally, right now, our culture is one in which it's believe women. And the frustrating thing is personally, I believe that for the most part. I think women have gotten a raw deal for a long time on this stuff. But I wish people would just believe facts, let the process happen, let evidence come out. And I had loads of evidence, and that's why I was cleared. And then make your judgment. But
when you look at the world today now, I mean, so all of these clients that you've had and people you've worked with were warning us that we were moving into a surveillance state, that, as Snowden said, you were going to be tracked, that we are doing things in other governments that you were funding that we don't think you would agree with. Now, you know, just a few years later, you're just now getting your voice back, as you know, in the work that you do, and getting the truth out there by people that are willing to share it. You're looking for the next whistleblowers and working with those that were already there. But when you look at this world today, do you say, my God, I mean, I knew there was something to what they're saying, but in the middle of this pandemic, people wearing masks, social distancing, 5G towers being put in, we're hearing about tracking. Our cell phones are being tracked literally to see how close we are to each other. Serious discussions about IDs that either let us on a plane or not on a plane or into a restaurant, carrying our medical records. What is it like for a person like you that sat and spoke with, and I'm sure there was conversations that we still haven't seen in the media. What is it like now to say, did you think it was going to take longer than this? Did you expect all of this? Are you shocked it's gotten this far? I mean, it's weird to be someone that sort of was told all this was coming at a deeper level than most of us. What do you feel about the world today, right now, the United States of America? Questions on whether this is going to be a fair election. Are we going to be tracked? I mean, we're watching, as you've seen with me, I'm kicked off of YouTube. We're watching the censorship of people. I'm sharing peer-reviewed medical science and opposing views to the narrative that the pandemic is going to wipe us all out. What is it like for a person like you looking at this world today that is, certainly it can't be catching you by surprise, or if it is, what is that surprise?
It's horrifying. It's so much worse than I believed it was. I wasn't prepared at how brazen the bad folks are, and how aggressive they would be. And ironically, I think that Donald Trump, his style, his ability, his tweets, his call it like he sees it, his upsetting the apple cart from the beginning. We'll put it this way. There is a reason why John Brennan, why Clapper, why Rogers, all the heads of the intelligence community under the Obama administration, there is a reason why they wanted Trump to lose. And the famous investigative journalist Cy Hirsch has talked about this, Seymour Hirsch. With Trump, they knew they were gone. With Hillary, they knew they'd stay in. And all of those folks, They're no longer there, but they are powerful and have deep ties, both domestically and internationally. You know, an information operation is a tool of warfare. It's information war, and it is implemented. We did it in Iraq, Afghanistan. We do it in war zones, but it is implemented, and its goal is to get a population to take action, not just to be influenced, but to act and think and believe a certain way. And that is why you had, for, you know, a certain period of time, Russia, 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 Russia. It's why Bernie Sanders was accused of being a Russian agent in the primary against Hillary before Trump was ever elected. It's all by design, blaming Russia for the DNC leak. I do not believe that Russia was the source for what WikiLeaks put out. I just don't.
Right.
I don't have any inside information. I don't know for a fact. I worked with those people and believe that they are people of great character, WikiLeaks, and what they put out, and they have never had to retract any publication since they have put out publications. And the reason they haven't ever had to retract anything is because everything that they have put out has been accurate. They are pristine documents. And so when I see what's happening in this country, when I see the rise of Antifa in this country, when I see the number of Ukrainians applying for political asylum around cities like Portland and Seattle, who came over here to do specific work, to do jobs, and to push this false narrative, I find it really brazen right now. And I think that I think there is a war within the intelligence community. I think that what happened to me is a very small, I think I am a total small fish in a much bigger operation that's happening. And it is playing out in front of our eyes right now. And you're a casualty. I'm a casualty, but we're not casualties, right? We're fighting back.
That's right.
And we're not going to stay silenced. And so, but yeah, I think there's a massive information operation. You have mayors. I grew up in Seattle. I lived in Capitol Hill. Capitol Hill is the area in Seattle where the mayor of Seattle and the governor of Seattle just essentially bowed down. And I knew Jay Inslee. He was a great guy. He's just not the governor of Washington, right? Like, yeah. But you have a mayor of Seattle who essentially puts their hands up and said, look, if you guys want to start your own country inside Capitol Hill and create your own laws, go for it. That could not have happened 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You have a media, a mainstream media, that is essentially complicit and colluding against a mindset, not just a sitting president, but against, they are colluding against people who simply want to get out factual documents, information. You know, this operation, the intensity, you know, organizations like Prop or Not or the German Marshall Fund, the intentional targeting of voices of dissent on the left who question the aggressive false narrative of the DNC on Russiagate, who question Mueller, who question Adam Schiff, who publicize factual information such as the testimony provided by the CEO of CrowdStrike, where it's finally released when he is interviewed during investigation by Adam Schiff's committee, where he states, we actually have no evidence that Russia took the emails out of the DNC server. They have no evidence of that. There's a major propaganda information war going on in the United States, and it's our country at stake. And, you know, people can be misled, but I have zero patience or time for individuals who claim to believe in a certain set of values and principles, whether they are on the right or the left, but are willing to sell out those values and principles in pursuit of the truth in order to make a political power play. And that is what I believe many have done. And that's why you have progressives who fought against McCarthyism in the 50s and 60s, right? And the red baiting that took place under Republican Joseph McCarthy, right? Who was targeting individuals and destroying their lives and careers. It was progressives who fought against it. And today, it's progressives who are driving it, all for raw power. And it's the death of the country. So we have to fight back.
So now tell me about your organization. I mean, not only are you still out there, you're doing PR for different clients, but you've just started an organization. Tell me about that.
I'm lucky to be able to work with some folks that are truth tellers out there, but they love America. And I think they are tired of seeing a lot of the negativity and the destruction of the infrastructure of the country, and monuments and monuments of civil rights icons that are being destroyed. I've been talking to some folks, and we've decided to launch a new organization. I just got the URL. It's called AmericanWave.org. Nothing on it yet, but it will be. We are building it, and it is designed to put forward a love of the country, but also calling a spade and putting forward the truth.
What keeps you going? What is it? There must be a hope. There must be a light. There must be a belief, you know, that gets you up in the morning and says, you know what, I'm not going to let them take me down. What is that light?
I have an incredible partner, and she gives me strength and hope to keep going. I also have small children that I'm fighting for. I also feel like I want to be part of the solution. You know, I do not think that, you know, movements like the Me Too movement are bad movements. I think things can be misguided, and I think anything can be weaponized. And I believe it was weaponized against me and against others. But again, I'm just a small fish, and I want to be part of the solution to make this country embrace, endorse, and celebrate the truth. I encourage all people out there who want the truth. Follow me on Twitter. I'll be putting out information about how you can join and sign up to AmericanWave.org and join the fight to help push forward the truth and counter a lot of the ops and a lot of the propaganda that is being dictated to us.
You know, when you started this, the social media wasn't quite there yet. You know, you had such control by mainstream media, which I think puts us in this position. But now, you know, every day I see a new blogger or a vlogger or a voice out there. The people seem to be the new media. How important are those voices? How important are the citizen journalism now? How important are those things going to be to the future of this country that you and I grew up in?
It's incredibly important. I mean, in the 70s, they published the number of journalists who are on the payroll of the CIA, the Church Committee, right? I forgot the exact number. It was in the hundreds.
Yeah.
Today, I bet it's triple. At a time when elements of the government run information operations domestically on the U.S., on the American people, we need truth tellers and investigative journalism across the board more than ever. And rather than have them be deplatformed, they should be promoted. Now, when there is fake news and and false narratives being driven that are coming from other countries, you know, trying to influence a population, yeah, get rid of that shit. Get rid of it, right? That's, you know, but have faith in the American people, you know? Let them see, let them hear the alternatives to the popular narrative, right? And I think most people in this country right now look around them and the news and what's happening in America, and they see that something is unnatural happening. It is painfully obvious that there is something unnatural happening. And I think when the public is presented with alternatives to the false narrative and false narratives that are out there, I think the public will start to wake up. And I think the reason why people are deplatformed is because the powers that be don't want that out there, because they want to continue their effort to manipulate the population.
Well, Trevor, I think that you give us all a lot of hope. You've been brave throughout your career. You're standing in it now. I agree with you. I don't think they can deplatform everybody, and we will always find a way. I think of our founding fathers. I think of, the letters that were passed around celebrating freedom amongst British soldiers that were trying to control us. We find a way. You found a way through. I want to congratulate you on your success in being exonerated, and I want you to know that we are here to help you and promote American Wave, a love of this country, which I have stronger than ever before, and a belief that we can make a difference. It's really been great.
Thank you for your work. And Del, thank you for your work, man. It's incredible, and you're a truth teller. And the idea and the fact that YouTube has deplatformed you, wear it with a badge of honor. It must mean you're doing something right. Take care, sir.
All right, I will. You take care. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You know what? I really don't care whether you think that these people we've discussed today are heroes, whether it's Zach Voorhees or Trevor Fitzgibbon or Edward Snowden or Julian Assange, Chelsea Manning. What's important is to think about what they've told us. Let's not shoot the messenger for a moment and ask ourselves, were they right? Were they accurate? Did Aldous Huxley really call the state of affairs that we now find ourselves in all the way back in 1958? If the answer is yes, these things are taking place, if when you hear these stories and you look around and you say, censorship is real, there are really people that would like to drug every child so that they can focus better or so that they can get over their depression. There are really people that want to inject an untested COVID-19 vaccine into everyone in the world, a product that has no liability for a disease that our immune systems have a 99.74% success rate of overcoming. And is the vaccine the ultimate agenda of the WHO, Bill Gates and Tony Fauci? Or is it something far more sinister? Is this simply just the last step to be used to, as Aldous Huxley described it, make us emotional, to make us decisions that go against our own happiness and joy? Is this vaccine being used to say the only way you can trust your neighbor and know that they got their vaccine is that we all have to get a microchip? We have got to track your cell phones. We have to have drones flying overhead, and you need to turn in your neighbors if we're going to be safe. All of these things are happening. And whether it was prophecy that this was pointed out over decades ago, or whether it was simply entered into our thought and our mind systems and we're living into it, I believe we are still free-thinking human beings, at least while we still don't have a drug being forced into us to make us happy with compliance. At least before we are forcibly injected with a vaccine that they may tell us is for COVID-19, but why not put something in there that makes me accept my slavery? All of this is possible if we let go of our freedom and our liberty. It is time now. This is such a critical time. We're coming into a massively turbulent election. You have got to be wise now. You've got to turn off the television, which, if you saw more of that interview with Aldous Huxley, he said, I believe will lead to a world where you will elect presidents and leaders that you don't even know. Those commercials aren't telling you anything. Look at their records. Look at what they've said in their past. Look at what they've done. Look at what they're promising you for the future. Promised lockdowns, promised masking, promised vaccine mandates, injections, drugs. Folks, now, please, wake up. We must wake up to our reality, because only by waking up do we change it. I'm not afraid of the time we are in right now. I'm excited that I am here to make a difference. Join me in being excited. Join me in recognizing we are here with a purpose. We are needed like our founding fathers were needed to escape the oppression of England, to create a new society with the ability to handle multiple ideas and conflicts at the same time, to be able to work through debate and conversation to come to a compromise that we can all agree on, that we're involved in a voting process. But our freedom of speech would always hold true. Our freedom of religion would always hold true. Our right to bear arms would always hold true, so that we would make sure that we were never enslaved without our say in the matter. This is the high wire. We are not just talking about medicine. We are not just talking about science. We are talking about freedom. And we will never stop talking about it. So I'll see you next week. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the Highwire Insiders who make this show possible. If you'd like to become a Highwire Insider, then go to our website, thehighwire.com, and sign up now. And please, share the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, BitChute, and now on Roku. Because knowledge is power, censorship is real, and we need all the help we can get.